Good morning, learners. I am Dr. Gaurav Rao. I am Associate Professor in Department of Education, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Rohilkhand University, Bareilly. Today, we are going to talk about the teaching of science in NCF 2005. We will be discussing all those things that have been told in NCF regarding the science. Let us first understand what is science. The science is a dynamic, expanding body of knowledge that covers every new domains of experience. Dynamic, expanding body and covering every new domains of experience. What does that mean? Dynamic means there is every time a new addition of knowledge in the science and a new construction of structure of science is made. And because of this, the science keeps on increasing and expanding, and hence it is an expanding body of knowledge. But this is to be taken into account that the change that takes place should be in the all domains of knowledge. Means it can be the cognitive domain, the affective domain, or the psychomotor domain. We have to take care of that. Okay, let us first understand what is good science education. Because science education have been in India for long, but the results that were expected were not coming. Now NCF says good science education means science that is true to child, true to life, and true to science. What does this mean, true to child? Many a times you have had heard, sir, this I have not seen in my life. Sir, what you are saying is not what I have observed. This is what I mean to say, and what NCF is saying, that when we are putting some new constructs and concepts in science education, that should be according to the child. That should be from his life. That means it becomes true to the life of the child. And that does not mean that whatever the child is observing is true. That should be empirically proven and put it in front of the child as a true science. And that is what true to science. Before going into the further details, NCF has also talked about the roles of science in the society, which is to be told to the child and the learner. The first and important role is the iterating role that keeps on repeating every time by the science, that is helping people escape from the vicious cycle of poverty, ignorance and superstition. Oh, this thing is not correct. You should do this way. Oh my God, the lunar eclipse is happening. Why are you going out? Be inside the room. There are things that are occurring around us are superstitious out of ignorance, and many a times these are out of the poverty result. The science actually talks about to control all these superstitions and tries to sort out the problem that is existing in the ignorance of science. And what is science doing is actually coming out the learner from all those superstitious and ignorant ideas by proving those incorrect or out of the customized rule. The second role of science is transforming the traditional fields of work into the new evolved works. I can give you an example, that is agriculture and industry. You have new techniques of planting trees, planting saplings. You have new yields variety of cereals every day coming. You have industries evolving every now and then with the new technology coming, and that is because the science is improvising the traditional fields of work in one or the other way. One more role of science is to lead to the emergence of new fields of work. Every day we have new peoples, new structures, new concepts coming in, and we have new ideas that are to be explored, and that is the one more important role of science is to emerge a new field of work, and that is very important because this field of work actually gives new horizons to the ideas of scientific institutions and scientific learner. NCF says that the learner should be given that chance to identify those new works so that the science can evolve. NCF talks about skills that are to be there in the science education in the learner and the teachers as well. The first and foremost one is the flexibility. Flexibility of identifying a method, flexibility of observing, flexibility of concluding, flexibility of identifying a method of observation, or it can be a method of quantitative or qualitative analysis, and later flexible interpretations of those analysis. This flexibility is basically the task that is to be given by the teacher to the student at every step, because if that is not given, the other more important skill of creativity will not come in. The creativity is the second skill that is to be incorporated in science education, because this was a big problem in science education in India, was this that the competence was there in the learners, but they were not creative enough to bring out the new things in science education. That is one of the role of science education, that if the creativity is not coming, how come the science will work for the new areas of education? And this creativity actually leads to the innovation. That is the last one more skill that is required in science education. Innovation means bringing out with noble ideas, new objects, new constructions, and that can only be reached with the flexibility given by the teacher to the students and the usage of this flexibility by the children to come out with new ideas, develop new projects, and come with creative models. And these creative models ultimately leads to the innovations. As NCF talks about for the students to have flexibility, creativity, and the innovation, it also says that observation of the physical and the biological environment carefully is also very important. What does that mean? That means when you observe, you have to observe for any meaningful pattern. Meaningful pattern means when you see something happening again and again, or when you observe some components, some parts, some organs in a similar repetitive sequential form. That forms a meaningful pattern. Any relations that you observe, any relations means a part of a concept if is related to with the other components, how it is related and why it is related. And then if you want to measure those patterns, if you want to correlate those relations, you yourself or the child has to himself develop the new tools, and that is to be taken into account that those new tools should interact with the nature and should be in the coherence with the natural observation. And this helps in the building up of the conceptual models to understand the world around the child or the learner. There can be so many things that are in the observation of the child. He himself must be thinking of about why it is happening, or if this is there, why it is. Those peculiar observations are actually the developmental starting of the conceptual models in the child. That is to be nourished, because those small understandings and observations help the child to know the world around. Means first thing, the pattern is to be observed, the relationship in those patterns are to be found out, there need to be some simple tools by which the observations can be done, and a new model is to be developed. Let us see with an example if this is to be done for the primary classes. Let us understand this observation of the biological things around you carefully and finding out the meaningful pattern. I have a sample for you to show and how to go for a meaningful pattern, developing relations and using tools. This is a plant which many of you must have had seen. If shown to a primary kid, you can ask, what do you see this and where was it? What is that part where the leaves are arranged? And what is the color of the leaves, stem and root? And if I put this plant back, how it is standing? On the contrary, I have another plant. You will be very happy to surprisingly observe the child will be very happy to see the plants, and they say, oh, this is that plant. Ask them to be happy and identify. This is plant which is standing upright. It also has a part which anchors it to the soil, a straight upright portion that calls the stem, around which the green colored organs are stalked, which is called the leaf, and the most important part is the colored portion, that is the flower, isn't it? What is the organ that is absent in this plant and this plant? The child will automatically identify, sir, isme phool nahi hai. The flower is absent and flower is present here and absent here. Now, you ask, it is how it is standing and how is this standing? They will say it is not standing, it is soft. And then you ask, what is the position of the root in this plant and this plant? They will say it is just present at the bottom of this plant, but it is present everywhere in the stem. Now, ask them why these are here. They will say these structures which you have identified as root helps this money plant to stand upright. That means it is a climber. This is something that you have to make child construct by his own. You may also ask the child to measure the size of the leaves. You may also ask the child to measure the size of the small plant around. This is basically what you have to make the child develop in the meaningful pattern, relationship among them, and use simple tools to use it and understand the world around them. In doing so, basically what is involved is the scientific method. That is what NCF says is a most important thing in science that a child should undergo with, that he has to have a scientific method of observing anything that he sees around and look for the regularities and the patterns. And after looking into the regularities and the pattern, he has to make some hypotheses. Hypotheses are basically some tentative solutions, some tentative answers, some tentative previous experiences that has made the child to reach to some conclusions. And in doing so, basically he has to devise some of the qualitative and the mathematical models by which he can test those hypotheses, means the answers which he have thought of, whether it is correct or not. And after doing that, he deduces the conclusions or the consequences, means he develops the new models of knowledge, and while developing that models of knowledge, he actually verifies and falsifies the theories which he has observed, seen or heard around him or her by their seniors. And after doing so, he arrives at principles and the new theories and laws. As just now we saw with the two plants, let us see that once again. If you observe this plant, you see the regularity of the leaves arrangement onto the stalk. Making a hypothesis that it is a plant is because it has roots, it has leaves, it has stem and it has flower. Devising qualitative and mathematical models means how it is going to be a plant, because it is green in color, it has root by which it is anchored into the soil, and a stem with which the stalk is arranged, and this helps in the photosynthesis process. Deducing consequences and conclusions is this only, that it is a plant. Whereas, when I say that this is a plant because it has root which anchors into the soil, and it has a stem and leaves around it and has a flower, that is why it is a plant, it can be falsified by going or seeing or observing this plant. This has root, this has leaves, but it does not have flower. It has stem, but it is not standing upright. This does not mean that it is not a plant. It is also a plant, but it is a climber plant. It does not have a flower, but still it is a flower. That means a plant is a body which has roots, stems and leaves and performs photosynthesis process and is anchored into the soil and has the characteristics of living organisms. And that is what I say is arriving at principles and making new theories and laws. The child will be so happy to understand today that he in class have identified the plant, the leaves and the roots. Wherever he will go, he will identify that this is a plant and it has a root, this is called root and this is the flower. And that is the scientific method which we as a teacher should try to put into a child. One more thing I must share, that in a science curriculum, there are some ethical validities that are also be taken into account. The first one is the honesty. When you are observing an object, when you are sharing a content, when you are putting the data and the facts honestly, you actually develop a true, unbiased, honest way of identifying the things. And this brings the objectivity into the science. And in doing so, what happens is this, that when 2 or 3 students come together and talk about, I saw this, did you see that? They said, no, yes, I have also seen those things. They cooperatively develop those concepts by their own way of learning. And that is the cooperation, that is the ethical validity talks about. Yes, the child and the teacher should be fearless and out of prejudices. Because when the fear is there in science, the science does not come. When a child is fearful, he does not ask a question. He feels prejudiced with those things which are there in his mind. That means there has to be some freedom from fear and prejudice, and that is another ethical validity. It includes in the learner a concern for life and preservation of environment. Because when I will make my student understand that what he is learning in science is important for him, for his life, he will be able to understand that yes, science is important. And in doing so, he would be able to understand when he is doing it, he is basically preserving the environment. Let us see the different curriculum at different stages as specified by National Curriculum Framework 2005. The first one is the primary stage, wherein the objective is to nurture the curiosity of child about the world. The very small simple questions, the inquisitive ideas of the child are to be nurtured by the teacher. They ask so many questions. Keep them asking questions. Tell them to observe the answers to it. This will develop the cognitive domains. And in doing so, ask them to observe, classify and infer. I just talked about those things in the experiments, that is to observe the things they are seeing and classify whether it is a plant or an animal, whether it is this particular concept or that particular concept, and then classify it and infer from it that this is what. The content that is specified by NCF for primary stage is basically the natural environment. Everything that the child confronts with around him can be his content for understanding the science. The artifacts and the people around him under which he is being developed since his childhood. some basic estimations and measurements of the basic things he comes across daily. One thing that is kept into the mind, that science and social science should be integrated as environmental studies as the content in primary stage. This is also said in NCF that a basic of health is also to be added into the content. The pedagogies that are being used or should be used as prescribed by NCF 2005 is the observation, classification, inferring, drawing conclusions, as we do. Make the child observe, then on the basis of observation classify, and why that classification has been done by the child, ask them to infer. Some basic language skills are also as expected by the NCF, that is speaking, reading and writing. It is not for science, it is also through science. What does that mean? Means when you speak for science, when you read for science, when you write for science, you not only read science, you actually develop your language skills by writing science. Means you develop language skills through science. This is something that is very important when it becomes so integrated, so interblended with each other, that when speaking, writing and reading comes as a common simple expression, the pedagogy becomes easier. In assessment, the NCF says that there shouldn't be periodic tests or grades or marks, and there should not be no detention. Let us see the curriculum for upper primary stage. The objectives are to derive scientific concepts, because in the primary section the child has gone through the ideas, the observations, the concepts around them. Now these concepts are to be derived in the scientific form, and in doing so they are to be engaged in learning, because when they are engaged in learning they will be able to develop the technological advanced models at the higher level. The content that can be used for primary stage are the principles of science, environment and health, reproductive sexual health. But this is to be understood that content at this stage is not diluted version of secondary stage. They are the introductory content of the higher stage, which later will be elaborated to them by the development of the or the evolution of the concepts. The pedagogy involved here in upper primary stage is the familiar experiences shared by the teacher and the students with each other, working with hands like making artifacts, making simple models, small projects, collection of objects. These are working with hands. Small activities and survey experiments, like going into the school ground and identifying the types of plants and flower plants and the big plants available in the school ground. Group activities, discussions with peer and teachers, organization of data displays through exhibitions. These are the pedagogy that are done at upper primary stage. And in assessment, the continuous periodic assessments, the unit tests, term end tests and direct grades can be done, but this is to be taken into account that no detention is done. Means a child who has completed 8 years of education will automatically be shifted to class 9th. Let us see what NCF talks about the different objectives, content, pedagogy and assessment for secondary stage. The objectives at secondary stage talks about engagement in the learning science as a composite discipline. What does that mean? This means that science is not an independent subject. It has inputs from various other subjects, whether other areas, physics, biology, chemistry, mathematics, geography, social sciences as well. This develops a composite discipline of science into the secondary stage. The content would, together with the other levels content, will add on with working with hands and tools to design and more technological models. As I discussed, with the muscular development, the secondary stage students should develop the simple tools and design for more technological modules by which they can come out with their own thoughts and understand science working, because this is actually the application of science in their local and global environment. They should be motivated to develop small projects to solve the problems around them. The activities should be done by them and the analysis are to be written by them. The analysis basically helps in their assessment, and in their interpretations develops in them the depthful understanding of the problems around them, and that leads to the conceptualization of the various things at secondary level. I hope this was clear to you all regarding what NCF talks about. Let us brush through some main issues again, that the teachers have to think of about the flexibility, creativity, innovations if the science education is to be brought at high level. There need to be critical observation of the physical and biological environment around the child by himself and develop the meaningful patterns and relations. In doing so, he has to undergo with the scientific methods like observation, hypotheses, consequences and verification of the theories. We also talked about the science curriculum at primary stage, the secondary stage and the higher stage. And we also talked about the cognitive validity, the content validity, the process validity, the environment validity and the ethical validity. The things which I shared with you is also available in the NCF 2005. I hope this was clear, and I wish you all best that you all use this in your teachings and learnings as well in near future. Thank you.